Welcome to Limitless You, the podcast that empowers you to tap into your extraordinary potential. I'm your host, Taryn Dube, and I am thrilled to embark on this journey called You. Well, hello, everybody, and I'm so excited to have you back on Limitless You podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Sherri McLeroy. She is another John Maxwell leadership coach, just like myself. So we feel like family, even though we haven't met yet in person. But fingers crossed, we will meet in a few days' time. But Sherri, welcome to Limitless You podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. And just to tell my listeners a little bit about yourself, Sherri, you are a principal of an elementary school, but the school is elementary to grade 12. So you cover a lot of ranges of ages. And you've been in education for just over 30 years. Am I correct in saying that?
35 years. This is 35.
Wow.
Yes.
That's phenomenal. But you're not just an educator, as if that wasn't enough to be able to do in your life. You're a coach and a speaker and a trainer, and also a recently published children's book author. So, welcome to Limitless You podcast.
Thank you. It's such a joy to be here today.
Oh man, I am so excited for us to have this conversation. I've had the privilege of watching your story from the sidelines, and we've served on teams together over the past year. But almost exactly 12 months ago, you were brave enough to sit on a stage in front of several thousand people and get coached live with Valerie Burton, who's incredible. She's coached both of us. I absolutely love her. Yeah, you did that and were incredibly vulnerable in those moments, like in front of all those people. Tell us a little bit about why you got on the stage in the first place and what that part of the journey was for you.
Yes, thank you. It was surreal, and it has been almost a year to the date. Um, well, I joined mentorship with the Maxwell leadership team, which was a game changer for me. And I
Mhm.
applied last year to speak. They have a day called Think Tank Day for people that are in mentorship. And I wrote a proposal and thought, well, I'll try this. But I didn't know what an educator might have to offer to a bunch of business leaders. And lo and
Mhm.
behold, my proposal got selected. And then I'm one of those people that if they put a teaser question out on Facebook or social media, I'll play along and I'll answer the question. And one of the questions 2 days before I was supposed to fly out, I was already a little bit nervous and excited at the same time about getting to speak and do my think tank day session. But 2 days before I was supposed to fly out, I got contacted by Lorna Weston Smith, and she said, "Hey, Valerie selected you to be coached live on stage about whatever
Wow.
whatever you answered on this teaser question." She's like, "Are you willing to be coached on stage?" And I'm like, "Sure." And when I got home, I went online. I was like, I don't remember what I answered to the question. And what I had answered to the question was, if you could be coached on stage by Valerie Burton, what would you want her to coach you on? And had found myself in the place last year around this time. My son, I have one child, and he had
Mhm.
graduated from college. And I was in a new phase as a wife and a mother of kind of being an
Mm.
empty nester. And I have a million and one dreams for my future, but I found myself in this new space. So anyway, I had created a vision board. So anyway, on my vision board, I had about 10 different things I wanted to do. And I knew it wasn't realistic to do all of them, but I'm a little bit of a dreamer. So when she
A
coached me,
dreamer or an overachiever? Is there a
both.
difference?
I think you figured me out. If I set a goal, I usually will go after it and reach or
Mhm.
partially reach it. So
Right.
one of the things I had on that vision board, well, I had several career aspirations. I have a lot of spiritual goals and
Mhm.
financial goals and health goals. I mean, I'm always working on my health.
Yeah.
But that year, in particular, last year, I had a couple of professional ones just because of the stage I found myself in as a wife and a mother, where I
Mm.
had an empty nest. And I'm like, I have a little bit more time to devote to maybe a lifelong dream. But anyway, one of the dreams was I had written a children's book. My mother passed away a couple years ago and was in heaven. And
Mm.
after she passed, just if I could tear up, it's because I miss her. But
Yeah.
things she taught me from a very young age, the way she poured into me, her influence and
Mm.
her impact on my life, a way that I processed that was by writing. And so I had written some poems and some articles, and I wrote a series of articles actually here in my workplace to try to help young parents know that they have significant impact in their
Mm.
child's life. But I had written this little poem about purpose. My mother helped me discover what my purpose in life was. So I
Mm.
started playing around with it, turned it into a children's book, created all these digital AI illustrations, and
Yeah.
then it just sat there. And it was like, ooh, the process of getting something published, I had already investigated, teased it out, and it's not for the weary-hearted. It is a process indeed.
Yeah.
And so when I went to the International Maxwell Conference and Valerie began to coach me, the other dreams, they're still dreams. Like I wanted to work on a PhD. I want one day I'd love to do a TED Talk and hopefully have impact on people there. I mean, these were I had like six big,
Yeah.
giant things. But the children's book, becoming a published children's book author, ooh, that
Hmm.
was a big one. And really, it's the reason, like the why behind it is eventually, I think what Valerie teased out on that stage was that I had to get this children's book published, not just because it was a dream of mine, but because of the impact, hopefully, that it will have on future generations, like
Wow.
mom had on me. So, anyway, if I tear up, it's always very like right there for me.
Yeah.
I dedicated the book to my mom, and there's some cool
Wow.
parts to the story. And I'll just share one or two with you. But I had started
Please.
praying. I'm a woman of faith. I'm a follower
Hmm.
of Christ, and I really believe in prayer. And so I had a team of people praying over this project with me, and they
Hmm.
knew that I was speaking on stage. They did not know that they were praying over the story, but they didn't know that that was what I was going to go after.
Yeah.
I didn't either. It was a little bit surprising to me when it got teased out because the vulnerability to tell the story of my mom in public in front of thousands of people was a little bit surreal. But I just thought, I have this opportunity. Why don't I go for it? The people
Mm.
that were praying for me, once it was determined I have to write this children's, it was already written. I have to get it published.
Yeah.
Um, like seemed daunting. So I started having these accountability partners start praying for me. So I set deadlines. I was trying to save money. I didn't have the money to do all the things. Children's books are a little bit different entity
Mm.
than other types of books because you pay for artwork. And I
Yes.
decided I couldn't risk the AI artwork because there was litigation out at that point where does the AI artwork come from and are they going to come back and
Right.
want royalties on it? So I learned a lot in my journey. But
Yeah.
some cool little milestones that happened. One was my mother's birthday would have been on February 7th. So as the process was going along and along, my illustrator, he's great, but he was moving at a different pace than what my brain thought that it would move at. And he still is. He's an amazing artist. He draws comics for DC and Marvel.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
he already had some published work out there. But when I realized that it might very well be possible that this book possibly could be published on my mom's birthday, I was like, wouldn't it be
Oh.
cool? So I had people praying that maybe, if not her birthday, I was like, could it come out in her birth month? Like, wouldn't that be a great
Mm.
way to honor the memory of my mother and her
Yes.
impact? And so, honestly, on February 7th, what would have been her birthday, I got the proofs for my book. And all I had to do
Wow.
was approve or
Yeah.
approve. But I knew we were so close to the finish line. And then my birthday was the week after my mom's. And so I thought, okay, if we didn't make publication by my mom's birthday, how cool would it be to have it in her birth month? And maybe it would be a birthday gift to myself. So anyway, on
Absolutely.
February 13th, I got an email from the publishing company that I went with. And my book went live on the 13th. I didn't have a copy of it in my hand, but it went live. I was like, look at how God
Happy
just
birthday to
works. I
you.
know, it was such a great thing. And honestly, I'm just so excited already. God is using my book to impact children's lives. And then adults have told me, your book, like most children's books, are kind of written
Hmm.
for adults because the
Right?
adults read them to the children. But
Yeah.
it's been a little surreal. I've had so many families reach out. And so I can tell you more stories later
Hmm.
about that if you'd like to hear them. But just, just story after story of from families that are texting me or sending me a picture of them reading my book to their
Yeah.
child. Or, well, I'll tell you this because this is another little fun part. My mother's best friend is my next door neighbor. We bought my parents' house after my
Oh,
mom passed away,
yeah.
and my neighbor is this amazing woman. And she loved my mom so fiercely. And her husband passed away a couple of months ago. And so I went over one day just to check on her. And it was a really cold winter day. And we were kind of shut in. And so I walked over and Miss Gloria, I just called her and I'm like, Miss Gloria, could I come over? I want to show you the project I'm working on and
Hmm.
share it with you. And it's getting close. Like I'm really close to getting it published. So it made her day. I went over just to try to, pour into her as a widow and love on her a little bit. And
Yeah.
so she said, well, will you read it to me? So I sat beside her and read my book to her.
Oh,
And we got to the end. Mm. And she said, I think you wrote this book for me. And I said,
oh.
tell me why you say that. Because it has some coaching questions at the end about your purpose. Like it's called Purposefully Made. And it's like, why did God make you? He has a plan
Hmm.
and a purpose for your life. And your job, our job as people, is to figure out what that plan is so that we can have impact. And so she said, my purpose has changed. It used to be Mr. James's wife and a mother. And she's like, I don't have that anymore. I don't know what my purpose is. And I
Hmm.
told her, I'm like, Miss Gloria, your purpose is that you're the best neighbor I've ever had. And your purpose is to encourage me. And so she kind of teared up a little bit, but it's just been story after story of different people that have read the book where
Hmm.
it helps them discover a little bit or think a little bit about what the purpose of their life is. So I
Yeah.
love it when people share the stories of children or adults who read it. A couple of grandparents have bought it for their grandchildren and they buy it and they read it and they'll say, I think your book was meant for me. And I'm like, well, I'm so glad. Like, I think my mom's probably smiling down saying, you go, girl. It's so
Amazing.
good.
Yeah.
So
That's
I'm excited.
amazing. I love that you shared that story because that's the question that I wanted to come
Mhm.
back into was you mentioned, I mean, we've just said you've been working in as an educator for 35 years. I guess one could say, well, Sherri, you know your purpose. Like your purpose is as an educator, you're impacting lives in the school, whether it's the children or, the staff, or the parents that you engage in. And so what led you to think? Was it just goal setting or like just a dream? But you specifically said like it was my purpose to create this book. And I also want you to share maybe some of the questions that help some of our listeners think, hang on a second, I might be 35 years into a career, which you love and have a lot of fulfillment from. But how do we determine, are we fulfilling our purpose? Like, what are some of the things we need to think about?
Most people, we wonder, we're born and we're put on this earth for a reason. I believe God has
Mhm.
purposes and plans for each one of
Yeah,
us.
absolutely.
And some people flounder and they don't ever discover their purpose, or they'll get caught up focused on themselves rather than other people. And I always
Mm,
believe our purpose has to do with other people. We need to grow and become equipped to fulfill what
mm,
that purpose is. And so a couple of the questions like I've asked myself over the years, because every year I pray into, okay, what am I going to do this year? How am I going to grow? And some days it's really big dreams and some days it's little things. Sometimes it's just, okay, who could I bless this week? Because maybe
mm.
part of my purpose is to love God and love my neighbor. And so what does that look like for me? Sometimes it could be a student that's brought into my
Yeah.
office that's maybe made a choice that wasn't the best choice, but I look at them and I think, okay, if that wasn't the best choice today, let's talk about it. Because ultimately, I don't want them to live in that space of the bad choice that they made. I want them to rise up and figure out how they could have done it differently. Or a parent, maybe
Mm.
sometimes when I meet with families, if kids don't make great choices, I'll have a family in and they'll be devastated when they walk in. And I usually have them laughing when they walk out because I look at it, it's like we all we're all imperfect beings, but we have this
Yeah.
creator who made us, and he has a reason that he created us, and our job is to figure it out. And so usually, I believe people's purpose lies in their gifts, their strengths,
Hmm.
their talents, what brings them joy. Because if we're full of joy, then we're going to
Yeah.
spread that joy to other people. And so, children's books, I used to be a literacy coach years ago. I worked in the public school district here in the state of Georgia for about 24 years before I moved to private education. And even in public school, just the impact. People sometimes don't realize that our lives were meant to have impact on other people. And
Yeah.
when I was a literacy coach for a long time, I would go in and read stories to children and then teach a literacy concept or a comprehension strategy or a reading strategy to help them grow as readers. But what I found was children's books have lasting impact. I think of books like
Mm.
Dr. Seuss. I mean, most people have
Yeah.
heard of him, could probably recite like Green Eggs and Ham or some
Exactly.
silly little rhythm and rhyme. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to write a couple of children's books where when I'm long gone and like I'm
Hmm.
no longer on the planet, the words from the children's book maybe resonate. And so I love to try to cheer people on, inspire them, and help them discover their purpose. So that's really
Yeah.
kind of the process that I take. I do, I've put a book here. Let me see if I can show it to you, but this is the way my book,
Oh,
but at the back of it, I included coaching questions. And if you don't mind, I'll tell you a couple of the ones because
please.
these
Please
are
go
the
for
kind
it.
of things. So, like, one page is coaching questions that people consider about themselves. So,
Right.
one is, what are your best strengths? Because I feel like if we can start identifying our strengths,
Yeah.
usually our purpose will lie in the area of our strengths. And even young children, whether it's them identifying their strength or their parents saying, hey, you're really good at this. I think of like my sister.
Mm.
My sister and I used to share a bedroom together, and she was so organized and so neat, and I was not. That is still one of her strengths. She is so great at that, and it is still not one of my strengths. So, but we identified it when we shared a room together as children. I
Yeah.
have an older brother, and he is the best salesperson, and he's really great at saving money and investing money. He was really great at it
Mm.
when we were kids. I wasn't. I should have paid more attention to him when we were children. But I really believe that, each of us is wired in a specific way. And if we start paying
Hmm.
attention to those strengths and jotting them down, or maybe keeping a journal of them, for adults, there are resources like Strengths Finder or the
Exactly. Yeah.
DISC profile,
The
different
disc. Yeah.
tools that we can use to tease out our strengths. But with children, it's just something that parents can speak into or teachers. I had a
Hmm.
fifth grade teacher. Her name is Mrs. Hoffman. I'm still friends with her. And Mrs. Hoffman used to write me notes and letters. I saved them. But what she would
Wow.
do is speak into me as a student. She recognized when I was in fifth grade that I had leadership potential.
Wow.
He
That's incredible.
recognized that there were things that I was doing as a child in fifth grade where people would follow me. I had influence over my classmates because of things
Hmm.
I hope I used my influence for good. That when I was a teenager, there were a couple times where maybe I didn't. But another one
You're
is like,
making up for it now. It's
I
okay.
know I'm trying. Thank you. Another question that I ask children or adults that I'm coaching or working with is like, what types of activities and tasks bring you the most joy?
Mm.
And I look at myself like, what brings me joy? Writing funny stories brings me joy. Talking to people and helping them discover their purpose, that brings me joy.
Yeah. Mm.
Influencing or leading people. I love to get up and train or speak to people. That brings me joy. Some of my friends are terrified to get up in front of people. They like that's not their skill set. So like
Yeah.
when we pay attention to those things, another one is like, what do other people tell you you're good at?
Yes.
We're all good at something. Thankfully, we're not all good at the same things.
The same thing.
Yeah, my I have an assistant here at my school, and she is so good at all the things that I am not good at. And I tell
Hmm.
her every day what a blessing it is to have her as my helper because she thinks a different way, she organizes a different way, she strategizes a different way. And I am so grateful that like her gifts impact
Hmm.
me, and that's part of her purpose here at
Yeah.
my workplace. So questions like that. I also included a coaching page where we can help kids, I mean, or adults, because it's this book's for kids and adults. It's coaching questions to consider about others, because I also
Mm.
believe we should be speaking life, words of life into one another. And what I find as an elementary principal, and I was a middle school principal for a while, several years ago, and
Bless your soul.
I know those tumultuous years where they all want to be exactly alike.
Mhm.
They're trying to dress alike, talk alike, be alike. And
Mm.
it isn't until they get until maybe 11th or 12th grade of school that they start realizing I really need to figure out what I'm good at. And if we
Yeah.
could help them start figuring it out earlier and then celebrating what they are good at. Um, I took some children, Read Across America Day was last Monday, and um, I went into three different grade levels and read my book.
Mm.
And then at the end, I had kids do some exercises where they had to turn and face a peer in their class, and they weren't allowed to talk about themselves. What they needed to do was think of that person that they were looking in the eye and say,
Yeah.
they needed to tell them, these are the things that I've seen in you that you're good at these things. It was so powerful. And one kid, when he walked out of the classroom, he said, that was my favorite thing I've done all week. I was like,
Wow.
why? And he's like, because people don't usually tell me what I'm good at. They make fun of me
Hmm.
for how I'm different. And so
Wow.
for me, the power of being able to help people specify,
Hmm.
here's what you're good at, here's what I'm good at. Let's celebrate each other because it
Absolutely.
matters. So that's a little bit of little teaser for my book,
No, that's so good. And
and
just so
purpose.
everybody knows, there's definitely a link below to be able
Thank you.
to purchase the book. I got to tell you, Sherry, I want an autographed copy. You'll have to bring
Okay,
one to the IMC because I'd like to bring one home for my family. So please make sure we get that
absolutely.
done.
Absolutely. My
Um,
suitcase is going to be very heavy.
I bet there are many people who want their copy. I love everything you've said, and it's so much of I mean that's what I do. I like to help people leverage their personality so that they can, be the high performer that they can be, like impact other people's lives. And, this is what I do with organizations as well, is that if we really tap into who the person is and what their natural strengths are, then, we get to hone those strengths into really formidable skills. And they are so much more fulfilled when they're working in their strengths. If I have to teach math, for example, I think I would be the most depressed, outrageous person in the
Me
world. Cannot
too.
do, cannot do math. Even for homework, it's my husband's responsibility. In fact, now we've passed it on to the older siblings. It's their
That's good.
responsibility to teach the younger sibling and help her with her math homework because it is definitely not my it's not my purpose in life. But I love so much of what you were saying, and I was having this conversation. I currently have a third grader, an eighth grader, and a 12th grader in our house, and then a college student. And I was chatting with my third grader about this, and I was like, "You are so gifted at." She's actually really gifted at drawing. So if you write another book, she could be your illustrator. She's
Okay.
phenomenal at her sketch work. But I was like, "That's special, like let's use that to do something and to
Mhm.
encourage that." I said, you don't want to be just like everybody else in your class. Like, I'm not asking you to be the top of your math or, those sort of things. Like, what do you like doing? What do you like to have fun doing? And she loves the stories and drawing and like she's a high I. which I'm assuming from your bio, you're like, I'm the fun one. People call me the queen of fun.
That is my
So,
nickname at work. I'm the queen of fun. I'm introduced
yeah,
that way.
that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like that's, we want to celebrate those things as opposed to I was told that I was too talkative and too fun and I needed to get more serious about life, by my school when I was back in school. And I think of how much time I lost trying to be somebody else that it took me many years to be able to figure out that having fun was actually the wheelhouse of what I wanted to do with my life. And that was having fun with other people. And now I get to
Yeah.
do that every single day, with trainings and disc workshops and the podcast. So I love those questions. I think that they're going to have an incredible impact on, and already have had on your readers, parents, grandparents, children. That I love that you added those questions into the book so that there's the ability to think and provoke thought whilst reading a great story at the same time.
Thank
Um, I'm pretty sure during this journey, you've had some, I wish I could just quit or throw it away right now moments. If you did experience that, how did you work yourself through those?
Yes, well, I did experience that more than one time. And some days still, I'm in new territory right now with the marketing of it. It's like I'm an
Hmm.
educator, so I'm learning and I love learning and growing. But yes, so early on, um, the journey for children's book publication has so many steps.
Mm.
And it's very meticulous. I didn't really even understand all of the terminology when I signed with a publishing company. I got well, I think the first document that came, I want to say it was like 17 pages of
Oh, wow.
legalese, that I was a little bit of a deer in the headlight. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
like, do I
I
want to
would have got my
sign?
husband to read that because I could not read 17 pages.
Well, and just like in legal terms, I'm not a lawyer,
Hmm.
but I read through it. I agreed to terms and still not necessarily 100% understanding all the terminology and phrases that were in the publication world. But
Hmm.
now I'm not saying I still know everything, but going through it once now, it's like, okay, the next time around, and there will be a next time. I'm already writing
Yes,
more.
amazing. Yay.
But I know a little bit more. I know enough to make me dangerous now. But I actually have 4 or 5 people who've asked me to just coach them through the step-by-step journey that I've taken. But there were
Wow.
certain steps that were harder for me.
Mm.
Um, I didn't realize that I would have so many conversations to communicate with my illustrator the vision that I had. And that's part of a
Mm.
children's book. Had I had the artistic skills to illustrate it myself, I probably would have just, written it and drawn it myself. My mother was an artist. That was one of the things that was
Mm.
really hard for me. It's part of why I put off doing it. Had she still been alive on the earth, I would have had her illustrate it.
Right.
The guy that I hired, I've known him since I was a teenager. He and my husband and I were all in a youth group together at our church years and years ago. And I've just remained in touch with he and his wife. And this book, it's a Christian children's book. So I definitely wanted another believer in Christ to
Yeah.
illustrate it. The other books right now, one of the ones I'm working on, it's just a silly little children's book that, I mean, I'm a Christian, so that part will be there, but it's not
Yeah.
quite as this one talks about God, like that he has a purpose and plan. It's pretty out there.
Yeah.
But knowing that I was writing this and it was a children's book, it meant something to me. I wanted somebody who'd pray over it with me. He and his
Hmm.
wife are still praying over the impact that this book is having because I'm sharing with them some of the stories of
Wow.
families that are reaching out to me and saying, wow, you have no idea how your book impacted my child,
Hmm.
which is sweet. There's a family that I know, and they had a little daughter born with like a cranial facial disorder. And
Wow.
they've been walking a really hard journey as parents, um, for their child.
Mm.
And they're part of here in Atlanta, the Children's Healthcare System of Atlanta has a cranial facial support group that parents get together to talk through the hardship of having a child born with, a struggle.
Mm.
But that mom sent me probably the most touching message the other night with a picture of her daughter, like hugging my book like it was a stuffed animal.
Oh,
She told me that, what she's been doing as a parent is trying to speak life into her little girl. I think she's 2 or 3 years old right now, but just
wow.
reminding her that God made you on purpose and He has a purpose
Wow.
for you. And then I have a student at my school who was born without a shoulder and without a couple of digits on his other hand. And he came up to me the day I read, it was a fourth grade classroom, and I read the book in there, and he came up and he's like, Mrs. McLeroy, I need you to know something. He said, your book is changing my life. And I was
Oh
like,
my goodness.
what? I'm like, why? Tell me more. I
Mm.
love that tell me more phrase. And he says, well, he's like, my mom and dad, his mom used to work for the Peace Corps, and she and her husband have this heart for adopting children from places in the world where, maybe they
Mm.
would have been discarded if they had a physical disability. And so, anyway, they have 3 children right now. They're trying to adopt a fourth from just different countries around the world. But this young man, they adopted him, and he just questions every day, why did God make me the way that I am? And
Mm.
he told me, he said, when I read your book, one of the teachers here just pours into him and eats lunch with him one day a week. And she had read my book to him. And he told me, he said, when Mrs. George read your book to me, he said, I had all these questions about, like, why did God make me? What is my purpose? And he's trying to wrestle with it because he
Yeah.
feel like maybe that God has one, but he does. And so it's just been like little powerful moments where I keep looking and I think, what is God up to as he speaks to people through the words of this project?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it gets me excited to know that I don't know what he's
I
going to
would be
do.
excited too. That's
I'm like, oh, and like someday the message that a mom sent me, like a private Facebook message, and I was sitting there and it was the one with the little picture of the girl hugging. And I told my husband, I'm like, let me read this message to you. And my
mm.
husband, who's not usually one who would tear up, he's sitting there like, and he tears up and he's like,
Mm.
wow. He's like, what are you going to do with that? I said, I don't know, other than just treasure it. Like, this is
Wow.
like fruit of the labor, like all the
Yeah.
hard, because it was hard. There were months where I was like, okay, really, like the struggles with the legal stuff or the timeline or like giving and receiving feedback. When I'd meet with my illustrator, I met with him almost every month to look at the different pieces of artwork and then paying for it. Like I
Mm.
paid for each page of the artwork in my book as a separate piece of art, which as an educator, I don't make a ton of money. I'm not complaining. I'm grateful for my paycheck and love what I make, but we're not known for our lucrative
Yeah.
paychecks in this field of work. But it's like a mission field, and it's to have a project that I'm investing my own personal money to
Mhm.
fund it. I just keep thinking, okay, what's the return on this investment going to be?
That's good.
While it may
Yeah.
not be monetary, maybe it's a spiritual investment. Maybe it's lives that are changing. Like there
Mm.
is no amount of money that can match a
Mm.
changed life. And
Mm.
like I keep thinking, okay, I can't wait to see what's next. It's so good.
What's next?
Yeah, it's so good. So,
Wow. I love what you said there about the investment. And I think that that's so important when we do chase after goals and our dreams, is how invested are we willing to be
mm,
uh, in in the process and in the outcomes. You could have easily taken some AI images that wouldn't have, maybe cost you $30 or something for a program. I don't know. But just the authenticity of what you wanted to create,
Mhm.
and holding true to your original dream of what you wanting to put out. The investment is costly, and I think John Maxwell says the dream is free, but the journey is not. And it's so important. I think that's really key for us to hold on to is we can chase many things, but if we're not willing to put in the investment, whether it is with people or with our finances or our time, our emotions, and I think our mindset as well. I think, there needs to be a mindset investment of, I'm going to see this through. I'm committed. I love that you surrounded yourself with people that held you accountable throughout the process. That's really important too. Um, yeah, I don't think things just land in our laps and it's like, oh, poof, you've got this book and poof, it was done easily. The world wants us to think that chasing after our dreams and our purpose, like somehow we're entitled to
Mm,
have it overnight. And it's such a big lie, like it's such a big deception,
mhm.
especially for our young people, where they see these overnight sensations. But most of those overnight sensations have been at it for years before it
Sure.
becomes an overnight sensation. So I think that point is really impactful. And hopefully encouraging to somebody that's listening, thinking like, oh, I've been at this for so long, or, I'm putting stuff aside and it's just not working. And I also love, I mean, I pray that you earn more money as
Oh,
you
thank
go,
you.
but
I'll receive
not
that.
but not to be held back, like not to think that that was a limitation or that you couldn't move forward because of what your bank account says. I think I saw a meme recently, like a week or so ago, that said, when God calls you to do something, he's not looking at your bank account. Like that's
Sure.
not his, that doesn't hold him back at all. And it shouldn't hold us back either. My husband and I have had many instances of that, of choosing to move forward despite what the bank account says. And yeah, we really need to count the cost of what we want to do and then be willing to put in that investment. Um, One of the investments for you though, Sherri, is that you do multiple things. You wear multiple
Yeah.
hats. And I get asked this question, it's like, how do you do it all? So how do you do it all? How are you doing this all? What do you do? To keep sane or keep
Mhm.
focused or, stay true to what it is you want to achieve?
Yes, thank you. That's such a great question. I'm not sure other than by God's grace, but I will say this. I get up really early in the morning and I
Hmm.
have kind of a routine and there's a consistency, even though I'm a high I and usually people like I'm a creative,
Yeah.
but I do have certain routines that I consistently do. So I'll get up, I have a stationary bike in my bedroom, and I get up in the morning and I usually spend a little bit of quiet time while I'm riding that bike, like just
Okay.
like moving my body, praying
Officially
into things.
convicted. My bike is in the basement and I've been saying for 2 months I'm going to get on it.
I moved mine to my bedroom because I wouldn't go down to my basement. And I'm like, it looks so ugly in my bedroom, but I ride it. So that's a good
Wow.
thing. So I get up and I ride. I usually have a little bit of quiet time and just pray and, read some scripture and meditate and then, get ready for my day. And I usually come into work early. Because I'm a principal, I like to beat the crowd to work and
Yeah.
have some time to tee up my day, if you will. Look at
Mhm.
my agenda. I have a very full calendar usually at work. Um, I have a really magnificent assistant who helps me manage that calendar, and I say yes to the things. I, there's a book called The Best Yes, and it was
Mhm.
life-changing for me. I read it a couple years ago, and so each week I'll negotiate what are the best yeses for this week. So
I love that.
I prioritize my time and try to set very good boundaries. I used to work about 80 hours a week, and
Hmm.
that was not healthy. So I set a
No.
boundary. So now I give a full day's, I get a full day's pay for a full day's work and I work hard
Yeah.
and I love the work that I do. It's part of the impact, but it's not the only part of me. Um,
Hmm.
there are other things that I love
That's
to
good.
do with my time. I love to read. I love to speak at educational conferences. So I try to be really smart. I write goals every year that afford me the opportunity to go and speak. I try to speak 4 to 5 times a year at larger educational
Awesome.
conferences because it fills me up and I come back a better person. So
Yeah.
that's a really great thing. I volunteer with the John Maxwell team. I'm part of their touch committee. Actually, I think you and I both are on the touch team.
Yeah.
I just heard the other day, I think I'm moving to the engagement team because I love
Okay.
my master's, my background and my master's degree was on motivating and engaging learners in content. So
Fantastic.
anytime I get the opportunity to do a keynote, or I love workshops where I have people
Hmm.
doing the engagement strategies. I love to do that. So I'll do those. What I do is I practice them here. I'll use them with my teachers. I have a
Mm.
team of 55 people that report to me at my workplace. And so we meet every Wednesday morning, and I usually will use a new engagement strategy and try it on them, and then I'll decide whether I'm going to use it again or not. Don't tell them if any of them look like I kind of
They're
use
the
them as
guinea
my little
pigs.
guinea pigs and try it. But they're really great about giving me feedback, and I can tell by their faces whether or not something resonated or not. I'll also
Good.
try coaching techniques with them. We
Mm.
do annual reviews. I just finished my annual reviews about a week ago, but I learned a new strategy when I went to a conference, and I decided this year to use it in my annual performance reviews, and I'll share it with you because it was such a great strategy. But I'm a part of Baylor University has a network for experienced educational leaders, and once a month
Hmm.
I just hop on a call with them, and I learn from educators all over the world. It's really fascinating. And it's an hour a month that I get to be part of hearing what other educational leaders are experiencing and maybe the struggles. But this year they've been talking about joy, and that's
Yeah.
kind of the highlights reel. So what a strategy that I learned was, what is your highlights reel? If like when you watch a sports program, I love basketball. So when
Right.
basketball season is in play, I love when they show the highlights reels at the end of the game of the best plays. And
Hmm.
so I asked my team members when they came in, I'm like, okay, for this session, like it's coaching session really, we're going to talk about what are the highlights reel? What have been the highlights of your school year so far? And I like to
Hmm.
use that with, I coach a couple of women professionally that just ask me if I would coach them. And they're just educational leaders. One of them's a banker, that just wants to grow. And
Yeah.
growth is attractive. And so I find just like we're having this
Hmm.
conversation, sometimes when you're coaching someone, you know, like a highlights reel to celebrate what's happening in your life is such a
Mm.
great strategy. And so for me, it's one of my favorite questions to ask people. So it was really fun. I got to hear 55 people tell me the top three highlights, what would go in their highlights reel from this school.
Wow.
So it was so life-giving to me to hear stories that I never would have heard had I not
Yeah.
asked. And I
I
really
love that.
that focusing, I feel like if we could focus more as a people in the world, people always get irritated or offended by things.
Yeah.
And rather
Yeah.
than doing that, I'd like to flip it and look at the positive part of, okay, at the end of today, when I go home, before I lay my head to sleep at night, what was I most grateful for today? What was the highlight?
Mm.
What made me laugh today?
Good.
What brought me joy? And I really feel like as human beings, we if we choose to focus on negative, we surely will find it, but I'm just going to choose to focus on the other. And so a little bit of my high energy of
Mm.
being able to do the things I do, I negotiate the time. I i have tenacity as a uh, consistency and tenacity. I
Yeah.
consistently have practices that serve me well, but then when I pick a goal,
Mm.
I map out a timeline. I do a lot of things on Saturday and then Sunday afternoon after church. I, but it's therapeutic for me. So
Yeah.
for me,
It's
working
not a
on,
burden or like, oh, I got to do this now.
or in the evening, like I'll
Hmm.
try to, um, I didn't do as much of this as I'm doing now with my son graduating from college and being gainfully employed.
Hmm.
Um, I still want to give my husband, time, but we also have reached this great place where it's like, okay, one night a week, I'm going to be involved in either coaching people or on
Good. Yeah.
taking my own master class because I love to grow. If I can join a new
Hmm.
class and say, what can I learn today? Like learning excites me. I haven't
Yeah.
arrived yet. I just feel like there's so much more out there and I
Yeah.
love learning from other people. So trying to pick which nights of the week I'm going to dedicate to family time and which nights, Saturday mornings, I usually get up before my family. Just part of
Hmm.
it's because I'm conditioned to get up so early as an educator. And while they're sleeping in, like I'll work on my side business. I have just a little coaching business, but sometimes I'm writing proposals and sometimes I'm working on content
Mm.
development and sometimes I'm creating a social media post like with coaching questions. Sometimes I'll sit like that's the time when I'll get up on Saturday mornings and I'll write. So like
Mm.
sometimes I'll take like a little retreat. In fact, I was telling you this before we started the podcast that, I'm going to the International Maxwell Conference. I leave Saturday to fly out, but I built a day in, and that will be like a little personal retreat day for me. And
Nice.
I can't wait to see what I accomplish in that day because sometimes when I get away from the normal routine of my world, that's
Yeah.
when the most creative ideas come for me. So I've tried to make a habit of
Very good.
during maybe a semester or maybe quarterly, if I can, if I can figure out a way, I'll take a day and I'm like, okay, on this day, I'm not going to do any work. I'm just going to
Mm.
go. There's a garden in the Atlanta area. It's called Gibbs Gardens. If you ever visit Atlanta, oh, it is like the most beautiful walking garden space. And I get the most creative ideas if I take a day and I go to Gibbs Gardens and walk around.
Yeah.
I actually take my phone with me and I'll pull it out and in the notes section, like as ideas come to me, I type them. I'm like, oh, that's a good one. I better remember that one.
Yeah.
Type it in. But the whole time just exploring, God's beautiful creation. He speaks to
Mm.
me. I have a vegetable garden that where in
Nice.
summertime I grow food and I can food for like green beans. I grew so many green beans last year. It was like, oh my goodness, I can't. Yeah. But when I'm down weeding my garden or
Mm.
harvesting vegetables, I'm writing another book. It's for adults, but it's leadership lessons that I'm learning from my garden. I
Amazing.
learn things when I do things that are outside of the norm. And so like all the hobbies that I have, that's part of who I am. And so finding time to
Hmm.
make sure that that's what it fills me back up. And I think that goes back to the purpose. We are purposefully made, but I really believe finding joy in our strengths and our
Yeah.
hobbies. My hobbies, that doesn't feel burdensome to me. Some people will be like, you want me to go pick a garden? Like for me, I'm like, okay, I get to go down and pick my garden today. I wonder if there are going to be any rabbits. Or one time I found a snake. I
Mm.
do not like snakes, so that was kind of a funny little story where once I found the snake, I never wanted to pick that row of green beans again. I
No.
called my husband. I'm like, get up,
I'd be with you there.
you got to come help me because I don't want to do that. But just the joy I find in being outside in nature and,
Hmm.
the diversity of not being locked in. Like some people, like my husband thrives on routine.
Mm.
He's a different temperament type than I am. And, but as a creative, I need that space and time to think and listen. I feel like that's when I get alone and I get quiet and listen, that's when the best ideas kind of are downloaded into my brain and then I get
Yeah.
creative and I'm like, okay, that's part of God's purpose for me. And
Mm.
a lot of times I'll have friends or family members when they want to ideate, I'm your girl. I'm gonna give you 5,000 ideas and probably one of them is going to be really good.
But it's so easy to come up with those 5,000.
Yeah, but not everyone feels that way. And so
No,
like
they
that's
don't.
another thing I've had to learn about myself.
Mm.
I feel like I'm constantly learning and growing and finding out the woman that I'm meant to be. And
Yeah.
I don't ever want to shut that down because I keep thinking, what might God have for me next? I kind of
Mm.
have this posture where I walk around, okay, what do you have for me now? Like I'm eager
Yeah.
to be a vessel for impacting others with whatever
Mm.
gifts God's given me. And so I just feel so incredibly blessed, the life that I'm getting to live, even in the hard, because my life is not a cupcake walk. Or somebody told me the other day, like, is it like you're walking on marshmallows where you're walking on air? And a little bit like when my book got published, there was this little moment where I was like this, and
Yeah.
something hard happened where it was like, oh,
Mm.
I'm going to have a hard conversation around my book. Like there were even things where
Mm.
didn't want there to be a conflict of interest. Like I'm not trying to sell books to kids at my school, like,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
kids at my school and their families were buying my book. So I I want to be ethical. I want to do the right thing and, manage my time and my resources
Mm.
wisely, but I also don't want to shut down whatever God might want to do through the
Yeah.
work that he's given me. So I don't know. I want to be full of joy over where I'm at in my life and what God has for me. So,
Well, I can't imagine you not being full of joy,
oh, thank
based
you.
on my short encounters with you. I think as I wrap up our conversation, and you just dropped so many incredible nuggets in
Oh, thank
that, and I want to highlight just to leave our listeners with two important things. I think the first one is you mentioned many times today about how much you love learning.
you.
And I'm 100% with you there. I've gone back to school. I'm doing a degree in psychology. And I get so much life from it.
Mhm.
Just geeking out on learning and reading and discovering new things. Um, and I'm coming to realize that when I'm in a slump, I
Mhm.
find that if I pick up something to learn, like whether I just, and I, it's difficult, but I'll put on one of the lectures or I'll pick up a book to read or, I find something that'll teach me something new that'll help me grow. It energizes, like it brings a new lease of life. And I don't think I'm alone in that. Like I feel like if I really wanted to, I could probably find a study in my psychology journals about it. I don't know how committed I am to this information, but I just think that that's a great practice that I'd love to leave people with today is that, if you feel like, oh, I can't do this, I don't have the capacity, I don't have the energy, try learning something new and
Mhm.
see how much it energizes you. You don't have to become a master in that topic, but it just switches on our brains, it switches on our hearts and the ideas and that creativity. So that's one thing that you've said multiple times, how much you love to learn. And I think that that's a key component for finding success in your purpose and finding success in the dreams that you've put aside or that you've put on your dream board and are chasing after. Oh shucks, I didn't come back to ask you like what's happening with the other 6 or 7 dreams, but I will we'll do that at IMC. But and then the last thing that I think I want to leave people with today and is just how much who you are is important to fulfilling your purpose. You spoke there about you and your husband have different temperament types, and something that is good for him is not it doesn't do the same for you. And I really want to encourage us to embrace those differences, like embrace being who you are. It's okay. It's more than okay. Like it's the actual thing that will get you going. It's the thing that will bring you joy. Have a beautiful big smile like Sherri has, that will bring you like the ability to be a principal, be a coach, be a keynote speaker, write a children's book, is because you're doing the things that you are created to do. And the questions that you ask simply, I'm going to put those in the blurb of our podcast just so that people can ask themselves those questions like, what do I actually enjoy doing? What are my strengths? What do other people say my strengths are? Like when people come up to me and they say, oh my gosh, Taryn, you're so good at what is that blank? Oh, I love it when what is that blank statement there? So that just gives you an idea of who you are and what you bring to the people around you. So, Sherri, thank you so much. I have really loved our conversation. I cannot wait for us to continue this conversation together next week at one of the meals tables or in the corner of a coffee or something like that. I don't drink coffee, I drink tea, but
I don't drink coffee either, so I drink
okay,
tea also. This will be great.
Fantastic. It's
Like a
going to be
match made in
wonderful.
heaven. Here we go.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. Yeah, but thank you so much. And I just want to encourage everybody, please get this book, Sherry's book. I think it is a phenomenal resource and tool, as well as just a beautiful legacy to leave in your home. Buy it, neighbors, Christmas gifts, birthday gifts. There's plenty of opportunities. So, Sherry, thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been just a joy and a delight. And just a quick teaser, shameless plug. There are
Mm.
more coaching questions in the book. So if you buy the book, there are more than the ones that I've shared today.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. That's exactly what we need. I love that.
More
See, you are
learning.
good at marketing. You're getting
I'm learning.
it. So
Oh,
good.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, everybody, I look forward to seeing you next week and have another amazing guest lined up for that. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you next week. Go and be your most incredible, limitless you.